All right, guys, welcome back. So in our last video, we were just kind of discussing the mistakes that I had made doing the bypass method for getting a bunch of, I should say, for getting as much of the power steering fluid out of the car as possible. And we've corrected those issues, and now the car is good to go. Although I don't think I got, as much of the fluid out as possible. We definitely got a lot out, about 2.5 liters of really nasty fluid coming out of the car. And I have done some samples looking at the new fluid, and it looks really good. Although it looks can be a little bit deceiving because I'd probably have to take out like a whole liter, and look at it like in a kind of a slender bottle to see how clear it is. And at this point, I've already turned in the old power steering fluid for recycling, so I'm not going to be able to do like a side-by-side comparison. At this point, I don't really care. We got 2.5 liters out. We got a whole ton of new fluid in. The ARS works perfectly. The auto leveling is back to working perfectly. Active steering and everything works great. The car has no complaints, and if the car's not complaining, I'm not complaining. And that means we can pretty much move on to some other things. So in any case, when you're looking at the top end of the car, there are so many things that you can check out. And there are things that I spotted here right away that I fixed on very short notice. So first and foremost, get this beauty cover off. You want to start looking around at just everything in the car, and especially looking for spots where there's oil. And one of the things that I spotted right away was this oil switch, and I've kind of cleaned it up quite a bit, before making this video, but I did notice that there is oil starting to come out on those wires, and you can see it's a little dark there. And this thing actually comes off really easy. You just press on that tab, and then look at that, guys. There's all that oil on top of this poor connector. And this stuff starts to seep. You can see it comes out the back. It starts to run down, and of course that can run all the way down to the junction. And generally oil is not like the worst possible thing to get on your wiring, but it's not something you want on your wiring, you know what I'm saying? So we are going to go through a full cleaning protocol and get this thing swapped out. I actually just got a price on the part today. I've been actually looking around, and it's really important, guys, that if you are going to replace this oil sensor, that you get a BMW OEM one. Okay, because a lot of the aftermarkets will bleed oil just like this in a very short amount of time. It's generally not common for oil to come out through the seal, but it will definitely come through, where the sensor connection, the electrical connection is, and that's a huge problem too. So this is definitely going to have to get replaced. Luckily, it's a really easy job. Now, I will say that I can get hold of an OEM part for about, like, I don't know, $43, $44 or something like that, plus tax. And I went to my dealership, and they quoted me a price of like 60-something dollars. And you might say, oh, we'll definitely go with the better price. But here's the thing. The dealership that sells me the part also offers a 2-year warranty. Now, if I get it on Amazon, it'll obviously have a 2-year warranty as well. But I mean, how does that exactly work? Do I take pictures and send it to them? And there's always these, pointing fingers and yada yada. And honestly, trying to do an Amazon warranty just doesn't really seem to make sense to me. But with BMW, if I buy the part from them and it fails, they can literally just take a look at it, confirm the failure, and then they'll go ahead and put a brand new one on there for me. You know what I'm saying? So that's really, really cool. And you can get that for just $20, So again, it's a value proposition. What do you value? Of course, it's going to take time and all that to check the car in and whatnot. But, if you have a good relationship with your dealer like I do, it's not going to take long for a service tech to come out, look at this thing and say, oh yeah, obviously this is a failure. It's very, very easy to spot, very quick. And for the difference in price, I'm probably just going to spend the extra money, get the 2-year warranty where I know I can get a free replacement for 2 years. You know what I'm saying? Because that's, something I can get. And, even, probably they might just give me the part and not even do the labor. And I would prefer that anyways, because I'm not terribly comfortable with anyone touching this car, BMW certified or not. I just don't care. I like doing all of my own work. I've got all my own tools. I know what I'm doing. And, it's more of a peace of mind thing with me. But as I was looking around, I also noticed over here that there's like this, I don't know what this is. At first I thought it was like an EGR thing or like maybe a crankcase ventilation thing, but actually it's some kind of an actuator, believe it or not, that has to connect through this port. And then there's this big gasket. You can see it with the 2 screws, and there was all kinds of oil kind of pulling up right here below where that screw is. And I was like, oh, that can't be good. So when I was at the dealership picking up some other little parts for my car, I asked them, hey, do you have this in stock? And they said yes, and they had it for about 20 bucks. And I can get this part online easily for like $8. But the thing is, again, 2-year warranty. It's very, very easy to spot if it's got a problem. If it starts leaking, it's not like, there's any real issue of pointing fingers. You know what I'm saying? Like, you take the beauty cover off, you can look right down there and say, it's definitely, the seal is failing. And the interesting thing is too, is when I took the old seal off and inspected it, at first glance, it looked totally fine. There was no like gashes or anything weird with the sealing. But if you look at it from a side view, you can see that the rubber sealing is completely recessed inside of the guides. Whereas on the new seal, you can see the inner, O-rings bulging out. They're much more supple and soft. And when they're bulging outwards, and obviously you put them under compression, they're going to make a much, much, much better seal. You know what I'm saying? So again, the price is much higher, but they had it in stock. It was right there in front of my face. I don't want to wait, 2 days on Amazon to get an aftermarket. And again, 2-year warranty. Now, to be honest, like, it is a considerable higher price in terms of percentage, but the cost is so low, like $8.95 versus $20. It's kind of like, yes, it is a lot more, but again, the ticket price is so low. Now, if that seal would have been like $200 and the aftermarket is like $90, then I might be tempted, to look at the $90 option. But again, it depends on mission criticality. This is something that, it's right on top. It's very easy to change. Going with an aftermarket, to be honest, guys, is probably perfectly fine. But you just want to make sure that you're the type of person that's going to check underneath this beauty cover a lot to make sure that that part is holding up. And if you're not that kind of a person, then just spend the extra, $11 or $12. Get the OEM, with the warranty, dealership support, whatever. I thought it was a pretty decent call. But these are the kind of things you want to look out for. So, obviously I'm going to get this switch here replaced ASAP. And it's also a good idea to make sure that you've got a 24 millimeter socket and a torque wrench if you want to do things perfectly by the book, although you could probably get away with just using, a large crescent wrench. Just make sure to know that when you're taking this thing off, it is facing away from you. It's facing this way. So you are going to use a clockwise motion from the front of the car to break that loose. And then you're good to go. So yeah, so either 24 millimeter socket or a wrench. But if you do have a 24 millimeter socket, you might as well torque it to spec as well. I don't have the torque specs handy, but it's very, very easy to look up. I think it's like a certain amount of torque plus like 15 degrees or 16 degrees, just to make sure it's nice and well seated. And then it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have some mass airflow sensor cleaner and spray some of that onto a rag, and then split this thing open and then go in and just make sure all the oil is clean off the wires. And then while you're at it, you might want to take like a like a pressure, like a canned air thingy, and blow out all of those connector holes, while at the same time packing all the perimeter with some blue towel and with a pick, and just absorb as much of that oil out of this connector as you possibly can, so there's no potential for it getting damaged. Because resplicing these, I'm sure, is a serious pain in the butt. And of course, if you had to like replace it, then it leads down to this junction box, and I have no idea how it even connects on this end. Hopefully it's just another connector, but you never can tell. And just save yourself the work, guys. Get it all cleaned up nice and good, replace the sensor. And this might be the original sensor. In this car, the chassis has 155,000 miles. So if that's the case, then it's did a really damn good job, and it's still technically functioning. But you just don't want to have any kind of oil residue stuff going on at the top of the car, especially in this area, guys. The oil filter gasket housing can be a serious problem. If this starts to leak oil massively, it can lead to some really nasty catastrophic failures. Especially if it starts to lubricate the serpentine belt. In fact, that's one of the ways that these engines get bricked, is because you have excessive oil leak from here, and that drips down and it gets all over the place. And the timing hardware can actually ingest the serpentine belt in some situations and just completely seize up and possibly destroy the motor. It's a major failure point really on the N55 engine, but it is something that is completely avoidable because all the gaskets to repair that problem are right here in the front of the car. They're very, very easy to get to and very easy to deal with. And even if you are like stubborn and don't want to disassemble this housing to put in the new gaskets and whatnot, you can literally just take the whole thing out and replace it with a new unit. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of options to make sure that this is not a problem. And I know with the new engines, the B58s, they actually moved all the timing components to the rear of the motor, and then they call that like a more reliable solution, which I think is kind of funny because, you know, now you have to drop the engine out of the car if you ever want to do like timing guides or timing chain replacement or any of that. Whereas, you know, with the N55, all you have to do is just pay attention to one of the most obvious failure points on the car, which is right in front of the car, you know what I'm saying? And you can avoid a lot of problems. But anyways, that's a, you know, a topic for another video. But after checking out, you know, all these other areas is nice and dry and dusty, just the way I want to see it. We've already put in a new air filter in here as well, which I do pretty much with every oil change. And we're, you know, only halfway through our oil at this point. So really nothing much else to see here. So next video, guys, we're going to get underneath the car and start looking at differentials and transfer cases. So as always, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon.